Hello, Jeff. Thank you very much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure.
Perhaps if we could just kick things off by introducing Rosslyn and tell us a bit more about what your company does.
Yeah, sure. At Rosslyn Analytics, we're a very fast-growing technology company. We specialise in helping organisations with data problems, solving complex business data issues through acquisition of the data required, cleansing, consolidation, and playing that back so that they can get the answers they need to solve their business issues.
So specifically then, when it comes to the procurement sector, where do you fit into the picture?
Procurement is the heartbeat of where we started as a company. We have a portfolio of solutions across other areas now, but we're highly specialised in the procurement field, pertaining to spend analysis and risk management.
So what are the most common pitfalls that you see procurement professionals struggling with when it comes to spend analytics?
I think, unfortunately, for procurement, they've always been the sort of poor relation when it comes to IT priorities and getting actual availability of data. They're very resourceful departments, and so they've tended to go it alone quite a lot, often build up their own resources and get data, acquire it themselves. Of course, this causes a number of problems. They usually have to rely on high-level data, often incomplete, not necessarily the most accurate, but they've done what they had to do in order to get information.
So you then are able to provide the additional layers of and data quality that they're missing then?
We feel it's important for procurement to specialise on their core competency. That's actually achieving savings in the market. And so what we bring to them is the ability to actually, don't build your own competence in data acquisition, data cleansing. We can provide that for you, and you can spend all of your time focusing on achieving savings.
So how have supplier risk management practices changed since the onset of the financial crisis?
I think we've all been affected by this wonderful past period. It's opened our eyes to a lot of things. Traditionally, risk management within the procurement arena has been fairly focused on managing the credit position of maybe your top 50 suppliers. Recent events have meant that the whole thing's had to go a lot deeper and broader. They've had to bring in lots of other factors. You can't just rely on managing these top 10 suppliers anymore. There are other things like geopolitical risk, environmental factors, etc. So you really need that whole spectrum, multi-dimensional view rather than a very focused element.
So how can spend analytics systems be used to aid risk management strategies, particularly with regard to devising effective mitigation plans?
As with any strategy or plan, it needs to be built on solid foundations. If you're building on incomplete information, you'd be building on sand. That strategy could get blown away at any time. So I think a spend analysis solution needs to not only provide solid data, but also the flexibility to look forward, to bring in additional elements that make it increasingly more valuable in analysis.
So what are the key things that you've seen then that have affected the procurement professionals in terms of the financial crisis? What areas have really had the biggest impact?
I think we've seen, and it's not only the financial crisis. I mean, you've got to look at things like changing weather patterns. So the tsunami in Japan, for example, being able to identify within minutes that you've got an exposure in your supply chain in Japan. The Euro crisis recently, you wake up in the morning as an executive and Greece is going bust. What's the impact on my business? How can I see that? How many suppliers have I got in that region? What's the impact on my supply chain? How's it going to affect my business? So all of this information, all of these elements need to be brought into a single area so decisions can be made.
And you have that now through Rosslyn, that single platform that people can use to disseminate what they've got and create a much more harmonious strategy.
Yes, and we have a fundamental platform that allows you to not only bring in your information from your core systems, your ERP systems, your transactional systems, but equally bring in additional feeds from third-party sources, from government data centers, etc. But you want that all in one place, so you can make a very solid decision based upon timely available information.
I think as well, one of the things that the Eurozone crisis has perhaps highlighted is the ever-increasing and dramatically increasing importance of the emerging markets. And it's well known that the entire financial culture works very differently in those markets. How can procurement professionals best adapt their current processes to account for working alongside these different practices?
Yeah, you're quite right, and I've spent a number of years working in Africa and Asia, and I appreciate a lot of the nuances and the difference in culture. But I think fundamentally that businesses are the same throughout the world. The data that underpins them is the same. It's usually a case of how you present and put forward the information that you're trying to inseminate within the business. And so it's important to have flexible outputs and flexible ways of displaying information through the different channels, through to different cultures. So you can get your message across, you can achieve the goals you're looking for, but you do it in a subtly different way to accommodate the culture.
Are there any particular examples you can think of that you'd be able to mention?
Well, I think if you take the stark differences between, say, the US market and the Asian market, the US, you'd be presenting information that's very kind of in your face and stark, and it's black and white. I think in the Asian market, it's almost the opposite of that, and it's far more. You need to represent data that influences in it rather than commands.
Very interesting. So how have you seen, rather than just between emerging markets, over time, have you seen the procurement function change?
I think it's very plain for everybody to see that procurement has become far more strategic. It's been elevated within the organisation. We've seen the financial crisis has positioned procurement as far more important. The ability to increase revenues has tapered off. And so executives are very focused on potentially looking at cost savings. And why not? There's simple math really. For example, if you've got a profit margin of 10%, if you make $1 million in savings, that's the equivalent of increasing your sales by 10 million.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are the key trends and techniques then that you're seeing in the procurement function at the moment?
With the increase in visibility and strategic importance of the procurement function, along with that is the increasing sophistication of the tools that they're demanding. They're increasingly asked to make fast, important decisions, and we're seeing that they're demanding very timely, easy to use, fully available 24/7 tools and data that they can underpin those decisions with.
So the procurement role is very much now one that's an influencer in a way that it never was before.
Very much so, and some of the interesting trends is it's not just on the supply side of the business that procurement's important. Increasingly we're seeing them moving into other areas, for example on the sales sides of businesses. From the perspective that they bring to bear a lot of very good contractual negotiating strategies that can be deployed to assist the sales team actually execute.
And of course increase that sales margin.
Increase the sales margin.
And I've certainly heard from some people that innovation and product development is another key factor that procurement seems to be playing into now.
I think, yeah, the procurement teams carry a lot of skills across the piece. I think from their background and their history, they are consumers of lots of things within an organisation, and they bring to bear lots of skills that help with various areas of the company. Product development, product management is a key one.
So what are the key analytics then and data sets that CPOs should be looking at in terms of improving their overall business influence, and also just generally in terms of how to improve their standing in the field of procurement?
I think CPOs have traditionally probably been faced with fairly static, historical-based information. And increasingly they are looking for and they need a more dynamic data, they need it readily available, and they need elements of it that are forward-looking, so they're able to forecast the future, not just look at the past and try and adjust behaviours based upon that.
Well, thank you very much for speaking with us today. It's been a pleasure, but just before we go, I just wanted to mention that in the research for this, I noticed there's a lot of content on your website. I wonder if you could tell our audience a little bit more about it.
Absolutely, yeah. Anybody can go to www.rosslynanalytics.com, and there we've got lots of resources that you can download and have a look at. We've got white papers, we've got testimonials from customers and from research analysts, and of course we've got an excellent app store where you can actually try some of our tools and see what they're like for yourself.
Fantastic, and not to compete too much, but if you also want to see some more reports, white papers and other interviews like this, you can visit www.procurecon-indirect.com.